I just happen to believe, like many others, that we're living in the period just before the unveiling of God's wrath. And here to talk about the wrath of God, in fact, here to talk about the wrath of God in a very special way is Brent Miller Jr., who has just created a motion picture that has that very title. Brent, welcome back to Prophecy Watchers.
Thank you, Gary, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
I love it when you come because we sort of go into this unlimited conversation where we're talking about a lot of fascinating things that are happening in the church, things that you're doing in your personal life. And I want to begin by just detailing the film that you've created called Before the Wrath. Mm-hmm. And it essentially is built around the theme that I just spoke of when we started.
Absolutely. Anybody who has seen our previous film, The Coming Convergence, mm-hmm. is likely very aware that the convergence of signs in these last days are closer than ever. Some of the trends and statistics that we see in global earthquakes and whatnot have become undeniable at this point. So I do agree. We are so close to the coming of God's wrath. And this actually, coming off the heels of The Coming Convergence, brought us to a topic that is so terrifying that the information had to get out to the public. And so Before the Wrath actually has been in production for 3 solid years. And it unveils discoveries from the time of Christ that are unlike anything that's ever been revealed before, in a way that I strongly feel is quite simply the greatest evidence yet that the rapture is entirely real and is going to happen soon. For a lot of Christians in this day, you might think, well, of course the rapture is real. But in fact, this is part of one of the terrifying trends that we've discovered, why this film was unbelievably important. There is a terrifying trend in the United States where even Christians themselves no longer believe in the rapture. Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. But when we were looking at some of these discoveries, which, by the way, it's all focused around the rapture, why the rapture is real, why Christ has to come back for us, and why it's very, very soon. Now, these are huge statements. I understand that. Almost sensationalized, right? I mean, it's something we hear a lot from a lot of people. Christ is coming back momentarily, and this will prove that the rapture is real, and no, this piece of evidence proves that the rapture is real. I've heard it as much as you have. I'm sure most Christians have. And a lot of it you have to take with a grain of salt. A lot of it isn't as convincing as it's made to seem to be. But that is why when our production company, Ingenuity Films, came across some of the researchers, the team of researchers that have been working on first century research in Israel, working with Hebrew University and working with some anthropologists, and they came across some things from the time of Christ that are so overwhelmingly compelling, all about the rapture, that it had to be produced in a film. And it couldn't just be described or read about in a book. It's so shocking, it has to be seen to believe. This couldn't be anything other than a featured docudrama.
And again, the rapture, of course, takes place before the wrath of God, the Great Tribulation, the apocalypse. Everybody's using that word these days, apocalypse. A lot of movies, a lot of sci-fi movies have the word apocalypse in them. Mm-hmm. But what that means in biblical terms is the revealing of Christ. As he steps out of the heavens, it's the apocalypse. And people forget that.
Right, absolutely. And the church has definitely fallen asleep when it comes to the return of Christ. And we'll get to some of the reasons why that is as well. And it's very unsettling. Some of the information we came across will definitely keep you up at night.
Before we get into some interesting, of the interesting qualities of the film, you have brought a little trailer.
Yes, we do have the trailer, and I do need to mention that the scope of this film, this is the largest production that we've ever been involved in. And the discoveries made are so monumental that even when we began talking with Kevin Sorbo, who was in God's Not Dead, he was in the TV show Hercules, one of the most watched shows on television, he instantly was on board, and he has been a very close part of this production through the whole process. So it's narrated by Kevin Sorbo, and he's absolutely fantastic. And in fact, the group of interview subjects we have in this film is, I would say, is one of the best collections of prophecy speakers that you've ever seen in a feature film or documentary. And we have Jan Markell from Olive Tree Ministries, Jack Hibbs, Amir Safadi from Behold Israel, J.D. Farag. We have the executive director from Lifeway Research, whom we work very closely with in this film, and more. So it's just incredible insight.
Well, let's run just a small clip here, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Sounds great.
As Galileans, we witnessed his first miracle. He warned us that a time of great deception would come. But we must hold on to our faith, that one day he would return to save us from the end of the world.
Most people don't believe that Jesus is coming back. What if there was evidence that proves that this is all real?
Because there were so many people bringing up little bits and pieces of this, I'm thinking, there's got to be a pattern here.
The Bible talks about it as being a mystery, but why does the rapture have to happen? What's the point to it all? A Galilean would have understood that perfectly.
They are the key to everything. I'm just so stunned. I never thought I would see this in my lifetime.
This is the most profound discovery in human history.
From his promise made through wine at the Last Supper, to why the world cannot know the day of his return, we were chosen to preserve the truth until the end of days. So even if we are not spared from death, others can unveil what we knew and believe.
This discovery proves that he is coming back.
Okay, I'm ready to talk now. And as you have done in the past, I mean, all of your productions are very exciting, artfully done, tastefully done. Let's talk a little bit about what is Before the Wrath. What's the purpose of this film? And I know you have a very serious purpose for it.
This is a film that has a story that is true. It's a true story, and it's based on real discoveries from the time of Christ, and it's something that has to be seen by the church, not something that the church should see, something the church in the U.S., all the church, regardless of your denomination, must see, and especially for pastors. Pastors have to see this film. In fact, before we kind of get into, because that's such a big question, why see this film? If it was as simple as just telling you in a sentence, it would be great. But it's something you really do have to see and experience to fully understand. And for example, the sold-out film premiere in California a few weeks ago, we had, shockingly, all walks of life, from Christians from different denominations there. We even had atheists and agnostics, some pastors were in the audience. I mean, you know, film premiere brings in everybody. Quite honestly, that this film is something that builds and builds all the way to a shocking conclusion at the very end. And people, quite frankly, were weeping and walking away in awe and in shock, regardless of what your preconceived notions were when you came into it. There were non-believers asking questions about the rapture for the first time in their life. For the first time ever, the rapture no longer sounds like something that's just that you can't believe.
Yeah, by the way, before we sat down to do this program today, Brent and I talked extensively about what's happening in the church today. He and I agree that something amazing has happened to the church, namely it's forgotten about its major promise. The major promise is, I'm going to prepare a place for you. I'm going to go to the Father's house, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to take you to your new place in heaven. And to me, that's the centerpiece.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, but that's sort of ignored these days.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's avoided by the church, and in fact, it's a terrifying trend. First and foremost, what we see and what many now see is incredible infighting in the church, especially when it comes to the topic of the rapture. And this is really the cornerstone of Before the Wrath. It's about the rapture, but it's presented in a way unlike anything you've ever seen before. Now, let's start at square one.
Okay.
Most Christians that study eschatology, that study the rapture, the majority of the focus is infighting, and I use infighting for a reason, but debate about the timing of the rapture, pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib. And I understand there's absolutely a time and a place for that. It's a very important topic. The timing is very important. But what we see, and even working with some of these amazing pastors and interview subjects in this film, what we all see is that it's creating just incredible contention amongst different denominations and views. And
I've personally experienced that, by the way. I teach the pre-trib rapture of the church. I'm a dispensationalist. I believe that there is a dispensation of grace, and at the end of that dispensation, Jesus is going to come back and take the church to heaven. And to me, it's all very clear in Scripture, and yet very often I run into people who are fiercely opposed to that. The Christians who are fiercely opposed to what I'm teaching, and they think I'm just a little bit, not sound in my reasoning, shall we say, to be generous.
Right. And I mean, there's actually a reason for that too, which is in the film. In fact, some shocking trends that we've discovered by working with Lifeway Research, which lends incredible insight as to what is happening within the church.
Yeah.
But this contention and this debate over the timing of the rapture has actually led to a much bigger problem that actually even most pastors don't see occurring. And in fact, we brought a video clip for that.
All right.
If the events prophesied within the ancient records are indeed to come to pass, then knowing the timing of the Lord's return would be of great importance.
The conflict, the disagreement, the contention over the timing of the rapture, and particularly in the last 10 years, it has gone off the chart.
You know, instead of saying, "My, how they love one another," as they said of the early church, now today of the church, they say, "My, how they fight with one another."
And recent findings from organizations such as Lifeway Research confirm that the infighting among Christians is deepening.
In one of our surveys, we asked when they thought the rapture would occur. The largest group, 36%, believe that the rapture will occur pre-tribulation. But if that's the largest group, that means there's not a majority believing any one thing about the rapture.
In addition to the 36% that believe the rapture will occur before the tribulation period begins, 4% of Christians believe it will happen in the middle, 18% believe the rapture will happen at the end. An additional 13% consist of other timing variations and theories. 4% just aren't sure about any of it. And surprisingly, the remaining 25%, a growing statistic, no longer believe in a literal rapture at all.
Well, let's discuss that.
I mean, so a lot of churchgoers are shocked that the pre-tribulation view is not the majority view amongst Christians in the United States. According to the data that we have, only 36% of Christians who believe in a pre-trib rapture. And of course, the rest of the statistics you see broken out where it's sort of all over the place. But of course, what probably shocked you the most was the fact that according to Lifeway Research, is that 25% of, not the population, Christians and pastors of churches, do not believe in the rapture, do not believe in a literal rapture, which is quite shocking.
Well, it's called the blessed hope of the church. Let's face it, when Paul was writing to Titus, he used that term, and he referred to it many, many other times. It is the blessing of the church. Looking up, your redemption draws near. And even if you should happen to pass away before the rapture, you're not going to miss it, because the dead in Christ shall rise first. So it's huge. It's a huge topic.
But the next question is, why? I mean, why is this happening, right?
Yeah.
And so it's directly correlated with prophecy. Again, it really comes down to prophecy. Prophecy being marginalized in the church, which is something that a lot of people who are watching the signs of the times that are saying is that the churches are no longer teaching prophecy. And in fact, it's the percentages are debated a little bit, but the Bible is generally about 1/3 prophetic, right? So if you remove 1/3 of the Bible, then obviously what the church ends up teaching is a very different Bible than what God had intended. It's not his complete word. And so they've gutted 1/3 of the Bible. Well, if you gut prophecy out of the Bible, you've gutted the Bible. And that's exactly what churches all across the United States are doing. But, you got to wonder, how deep does that go? How bad really is it? We know they're marginalizing it. We know there's fewer Christians than ever before even understand the rapture, And the ones that do debate it and study it, it's all about when is it? But most Christians never stop and ask, why? Why is there a rapture beyond just, Christ loves us and is coming back for us, but why?
So that's a good point, a very good point. And how do you address that?
I mean, the why is actually the answer to everything, and it's the discovery that those that were with Christ in the first century understood so clearly it was not a mystery to them, and it's something that we have lost over the last 2,000 years. Now, before some people might get the wrong idea, I know there's nothing new under the sun. Okay, this is not something new theologically. It's not new doctrine. It's 100% biblical. In fact, it's been staring us in the face this entire time. It's woven all throughout the scriptures. And it's something that was there, but theologians never really quite understood until now. And only now, after these discoveries, do we look at the rapture in a completely new light. And it makes so much sense, not only to believers, where some theologians are saying this is the greatest discovery in the last 100 years and has to be seen by the church and will unite Christians who are, that have growing contention in these last days before the Lord's return, but finally explains better than anything ever has before to non-believers, to skeptics, to those that reject prophecy, reject the rapture, that this is real. This is going to happen.
So you're saying that in Before the Wrath you have inserted some little tidbits that will help people really to understand more about what the rapture is.
Absolutely. In fact, you can probably agree that most Christians, the ones that do believe in the rapture, that are waiting for that blessed hope, they don't understand the rapture. And this is kind of key to this foundation here. They themselves don't understand why the rapture has to happen. So Christians, and that's the majority of Christians, and pastors are not teaching it, obviously, because they're marginalizing prophecy. So if Christians themselves don't even understand why it has to happen, well, how are we supposed to explain it to a non-believer? And we all have loved ones that don't understand
Our listeners
this.
are perking up their ears right now and say, okay, give me a clue. Why must the rapture happen?
Oh.
And now you've got this, I know, built into your script, into your presentation.
Yeah.
So answer the question, if you will, please. And you don't have to answer the whole thing, but give us some idea where you started.
Oh, that is the big question. And in fact, the way that this film was written and is presented is that it ends up painting that picture, painting that conclusion to where it's almost undeniable.
Well, you were saying that there's something about the Jewish wedding, for example, that is a precursor. It gives us a clue as to how the Lord looks at the world and how he looks at prophecy and so forth.
Those that study the return of Christ have discovered that there is a shocking correlation between what some call the ancient Jewish wedding culture and the return of Christ. Now, this film does contain a lot of that information, which is almost a timeline in itself, right? From the first coming to the second coming of Christ. But there was always a lot of holes in the whole picture. It's why it still continues to be a debated topic. But what ancient anthropologists have discovered over 10 solid years of research in Israel, in fact, specifically the area of Galilee, is essentially the missing pieces to the puzzle where their entire ancient wedding culture now makes perfect sense. And it honestly parallels precisely the complete timeline from the first coming to the second coming of Christ and everything in between. It answers all the questions and actually presents one of the most beautiful stories that we have ever come across about God's love for us. So much so that people walk away from this film, the premiere that we had, weeping and changed forever. And it's actually one of the most powerful ministry tools. In fact, it's the most powerful ministry tool I have ever seen about the rapture, for pastors, for believers, for non-believers. But we need to understand is that Jesus wasn't simply a Jew. He was a Galilean. And we know that from reading the scriptures. We go,
Absolutely.
Of course he's a Galilean. Right. But his disciples were Galileans as well. You're like, okay, they were Galileans as well. So not just Jews, but Galileans. Why does that make a difference? Well, Jesus, as we know, uses parables and real-world examples to describe and explain the things of God, the things of heaven to us in a way that we can understand. So when he spoke to his disciples, he used the same approach. So he spoke to them in the Galilean vernacular, in the Galilean tongue. Now, it's important to know, and this was some of the things that were uncovered in the Middle East in years of this research, is that Galilean culture was different than what we call ancient Jewish culture, say in the heart of like Jerusalem, for example.
That's amazing. And what I'm thinking about is Peter at the trial of Jesus was standing out warming himself by a fire, and one of the people around him said, aren't you one of those Galileans?
Right.
You talk like a Galilean. And Peter says, nope, I'm not one of those. So there was an identifiable Galilean accent, culture, different way of thinking, maybe?
Absolutely, there were. The Galileans stuck out. They did not blend well in with, say, the population in Jerusalem, which was kind of the heart of the religious activities. Definitely, the Galileans did some things differently. And this is the key to actually understanding the rapture. Because remember, it was the disciples, the Galilean disciples that went to Christ and asked about the end of days. Tell us about when you're going to return. They were told about the end of the world, the second coming and the rapture before anybody else. And Jesus explained it to them in a way they understood.
Wow.
Not just the Jews.
Well, we are running short on time, and before we run out, I want to tell you that we have, Before the Wrath, in our online bookstore. ProphecyWatchers.tv. Scroll down through the online bookstore, and you're going to find Brent Miller Jr.'s name and the name of this motion picture, Before the Wrath. And You're going to want to see this. You're going to want to share it with friends. The way Brent talks about it, it just sounds to me like an excellent witnessing tool. And witnessing without the anguish of being embarrassed and uncertain about how to present the gospel, just share the film, right?
I mean, bring it to your pastor and have them show the entire congregation. That's the point of this film. Show it to everybody. It needs to be seen.
Yours for a gift of $25, free shipping anywhere in the U.S. And by the way, as we like to do, we put things together in packages. And we have put together a package called the Rapture and Wrath package, which contains 5 items. Before the Wrath, plus the coming convergence, plus another film that Brent has made called The Final Prophecies, and a couple of books for you. Here's Apocalypse Road with Bill Salas, and a DVD in which Bill and others discuss, guess what? Prophecy and the Rapture. We're calling it the Rapture and Wrath package, yours for a gift of $60, free shipping anywhere in the United States. So we've got the materials for you, and we're beginning with this major motion picture, Before the Wrath. Now, we still have some time. Let's wrap it up, and because when I've talked with Brent Miller Jr., he's excited. I've never seen him this excited about any project that he's done, right?
Yeah, you've got that right.
And it's been a huge undertaking. A lot of technical things had to be accomplished.
Absolutely. We filmed this on a set with over 100 actors and extras down in Los Angeles. It's
Wow.
the same set where the TV show SEAL Team is filmed, and some features such as 12 Strong, scenes from American Sniper were all filmed on this Hollywood set. And this story is that important.
So it's a high-quality production.
Absolutely high quality. That's why Kevin Sorbo got on board to narrate it, because it's fascinating and it's going to make a huge difference in the church. But the resistance that we've received from the enemy through this entire process, 3 solid years of production work, and we've had so many trials and tribulations along the way. There's been very serious health conditions, deaths that involved the crew that delayed filming even by months. The large fires down in Los Angeles, Kevin Sorbo, who narrates the film, was affected by those large fires and had to relocate to the East Coast. And so our entire film crew, for recording him in a studio for the narration, we had to fly all the way out to New York City and meet with him in a studio. It's been every step of the way has been resistance and even pushback from even Christians who don't want to hear about the rapture, who don't want this message to get out. We've received a lot of trial, and it's been through the grace of God that his hands have been on this production, and he has led it to its conclusion to be released, and it's because of his will and his grace that this film is out and available now.
It's called Before the Wrath. Yours for a gift, again, of $25. Free shipping anywhere in the U.S. Brent Miller Jr., thanks for being here. We're going to talk to you again.
All right, thank you.
I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.